What's going on, everybody? I am DB, and let's talk about while loops today.
While I'm here.
If you've watched this channel at all and you didn't expect a dad joke, you only have yourself to blame for that last one. Let's go ahead and open up our Java folder again with our IDE. So I'm going to go ahead and pop right into it. Let's go ahead and make a new file. We're going to click the little plus sign in the top left corner. And this one's just going to be called while.java. We're going to need to make a class. So let's go ahead and type class. We're going to call this while. And if you've ever made a main method before, say it with me. Public static void main string array args. And let's get into it. Okay, so what is a while loop? A while loop is another loop that can loop over a section of code, just like a for loop of what we talked about in the previous video. But one of the key differences between the for and the while loop is the while loop, you may not know when it's going to end. Let's go ahead and take a look at the basic structure of a while loop. So I'm going to go ahead and start writing down some code. We're going to go ahead and type while, open and close parentheses, and then open and close curly brackets. Okay, so a lot like the for loop, there's going to be stuff that's going to go between the parentheses here. A very basic while loop can have one condition. You can obviously create more conditions using ands and ors, like stuff that we learned about in the last video. So let's set up a basic condition that goes inside the parentheses. So what we're going to do real quick is we're actually going to define a variable first outside of our while loop. So I'm going to say int I equals 0. And one thing you may notice already is inside the for loop, we actually put this actually inside the parentheses. But with a while loop, we're going to go ahead and leave this on the outside. So what we're going to look for is we'll say if I is less than 10. Okay, so you know how in a for loop we would do something like after we say our condition, our stopping condition, we would say like I++ here? Well, that's still going to happen, but it's going to happen inside of the actual loop block here. So what we're going to do simply in this case, we'll go ahead and say I++ down here at the bottom with the semicolon. And now let's just go ahead and do a little print. So I'll say system.out.print line, and we'll just go ahead and print I. And let's go ahead and save this. Go ahead and open a terminal, and then if you've done this before, let's go ahead and go to our desktop and Java folder. And now let's go ahead and compile. So we'll say javac while.java. And we're going to compile it by typing java while. And we can see that we get our 0 through 9 kind of as we expected with the for loop. Let's go back real quick and take a look at the while loop again. So one of the important things to take note of again is our condition is only one statement here. So we can definitely increment by doing it inside of the block as we said before. But what happens if we don't do that? Well, let's go ahead and erase our increment, save this, and let's go ahead and compile and run. And you can see we created an infinite loop just like we did with the for loop before. So the reason why this infinite loop, and I'm going to cancel it by hitting Control C. So the reason why the infinite loop is happening is because nothing is incrementing I. It's really, really important that whenever you're using a while loop, that you remember whatever your check is in here, that you're working towards completing it inside of the block that you have here. So to show off a couple of things that we did in the previous video, another thing that we could do is we could actually do a break or even a continue statement. So let's go ahead and say if we're going to say I is greater than 5, we're going to go ahead and do a break statement. So what do you think is going to happen in this one? If you remember what a break statement was from the previous video, go ahead and take a guess. Let's find out together. So I'm going to go ahead and go back here. I already saved my code. We're going to go ahead and compile and run. And you can see we still have an infinite loop. The reason why, I never changed my incrementer. So let's go ahead and cancel that. And I was just testing you to make sure that you were paying attention. Obviously you probably caught that, and I know you're smart enough to catch that, wouldn't you? You'd think I was, right? So let's go ahead and put the I++ in. Let's go ahead and compile and run. So we'll go ahead and compile our code, and we're gonna run it. Oops, not compile it again. We're gonna run it. And now you can see it goes 0 through 6 and stops. So let's see why that happens. So I is 0 when we first come in, so it's gonna print out first. So I is 0 the first pass through. Then it's gonna come down and it's gonna increment, because if you look at the I++, it's outside of this if statement. So that's kind of important to know, because if this was inside the if, we would have another infinite loop. So here, what we could do is we see I++, so it's gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because remember, I now has to be greater than 5. And once it's greater than 5, then it'll come into here and break. So if we remember with continue allows you to skip code. So like, see if I wanted to skip here, what would happen if I put continue right here? Let's find out. So if I put continue here, do you think I'm gonna end up with an infinite loop? Well, let's run it. So we're gonna come in, we're gonna go compile, and we're gonna run. And look at that, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6. No magic here. The reason why 6s are printing is because remember, once this is greater, what's gonna happen is this is not gonna increment. So what literally is happening is the I++ is getting skipped every single time, and then we're just coming right back around and printing I. So basically it's saying, okay, well, I is 6, we're skipping this, come back around, I is 6, we're skipping that, come back around, and so on and so forth. So you kind of get the point with that. So one of the things that we didn't show off in the last video is how to decrement. And that's one thing I want to make sure gets covered in this video as well. So we have I equal to 0 here. Let's actually go ahead and set I equal to 10. And then instead of actually checking to see if I is less than 10, let's check to see if I is greater than or equal to 0. And then instead of saying I++, in Java, you can also say I minus minus to do a decrement as well, which is really cool. Basically, it's just a way of decreasing I, just like plus plus increases I. So let's get rid of this if statement real quick, and let's see this code in action and see what happens. So I'm gonna save my code and run it. And you can see it actually counts down from 10 to 0. So that's one other little cool thing that we didn't do in the last video. Let's show off one other cool thing about while loops that we could do that's a little bit different from the for loop. So I'm gonna go ahead and make a Boolean variable here, and let's call this found 5. And we're gonna say this is false. Okay, so the purpose of this variable here is once we find the number 5, we want to set this Boolean variable to true, because that's going to indicate that we found the number 5. So let's set up an if condition now in our while loop, and we're going to look to see if we found the number 5. So I'm going to say if I equals 5, then we're going to just go ahead and set found 5 equal to true. So once this becomes true, then we can actually use this to exit our while loop. What I'm going to do now is use the AND condition that we learned back in the if statements video. Let's go ahead and put 2 ANDs. And now let's use our found 5 variable. I'm going to say found 5 equals false. So let's try to understand what's happening in this while loop. We have 2 conditions here. The first condition is saying while I is greater than or equal to 0 and found 5 is false. In order for this while loop to work, both of these conditions must hold true, otherwise the loop will end. So I want everyone to take a guess right now. What do you think is going to happen here? Do you think we're going to count down from 10 all the way to 0? Do you think we're going to exit the loop immediately and nothing is going to print? Or do you think we're going to count down from 10 to 5 and exit the loop? Well, let's find out together. So I'm going to save this. Let's go ahead and run it. And if you said 10 to 5, you're absolutely correct. And the reason why this stops when this is 5, let's try to understand here. What's going on is I is counting down from 10 by using this minus minus. But once I is equal to 5, we're going to set found 5 equal to true. So basically what's going to happen next is the code down below is still going to print. So we're still going to do a system.out.print and we're still going to decrement I. But once we come back up to check our conditions, this is what's going to happen. First, I is still greater than 0, so this holds true. But found 5 is now true. It's no longer false. So since this is true, and if you remember from the AND statements that we used before, both sides have to be true in order for this to continue. And if both sides are not true, this whole thing is false right here. And now we can exit the loop. So basically what's going to happen is it's going to come to the end of this curly bracket right here. And then it's going to execute whatever code's down below. You can almost think of a while loop like an if condition, just a normal if condition that loops in a sense. So that's one way you would use a while loop differently than a for loop. Pretty cool, huh? That's all for this video today. So I'm going to go ahead and kick this to Dino in the future.
Time loops. How lovely.
That concludes this tutorial on while loops. I hope you learned a ton. If not, that's okay. Why do people always tell everyone to hit the subscribe button? Do what you want to do. It's your life. Ultimately, the only thing I want is for you to learn. So let's keep learning. Let's keep rocking. And let's do it. I think this is starting to become a trend where I just decide to make myself dizzy at the end of every video. But if as long as it made you laugh, I guess I got something out of it because I think I got a concussion. Thank you, everybody. Peace out. I'll catch you later.